If someone had told me morning would arrive with coffee, not regret, I would have asked for a refill. I stared at the wrinkled notice in my hand. The words community service required practically sneering up at me from the cheap copy paper. 20 hours just that stood between me and the arts grant. That might finally pull me out of the 3-year hole I'd been digging. The Heartfelt public library smelled like old paper and a little defeat. As I pushed through the heavy glass doors, dust motes drifted in the afternoon sun pouring through the tall windows. And I wondered how many other desperate souls had crossed these floors chasing chances, just out of reach. You must be Maya Hart. The librarian's voice cut through my brooding. We're doing the annual reorganization in the back. Just follow the voices. I clipped on a volunteer badge and headed toward the chatter. The back room looked like a book bomb had gone off, cardboard boxes everywhere, some labeled, most not. It was going to be a long 20 hours. That's when I saw her. She stood near the poetry section, blonde hair catching the fluorescent light like spun gold. Designer jeans that probably cost more than my rent. Cashmere sweater that whispered money with every movement. Everything about her screamed wealth. From her perfect manicure to the way she held herself like the world owed her something beautiful. I looked down at my thrift store flannel and faded jeans, suddenly feeling like an imposter in my own life. I don't think we've met. Her voice was warm honey over gravel as she approached. I'm Serena Maya. I kept my voice neutral, already building walls. Rich people and I had a complicated history, mostly involving me photographing their parties while they pretended I was invisible. So, what brings you to book prison? She gestured at the chaos around us. Community service requirement. I didn't elaborate. Something about her made me want to keep my cards close. She nodded knowingly. I'm here because Victor insisted I needed to do something meaningful with my time between trips. Victor. Of course. She had people telling her what to do with her abundance of free time. We worked in comfortable silence for the next hour, sorting through romance novels and biographies. I found myself stealing glances when she bent to lift boxes, noting the graceful way she moved, like she'd never had to worry about throwing out her back from manual labor. Is that yours? She pointed at my camera bag, the one with the broken zipper held together by duct tape. Yeah. I touched it protectively. I'm a photographer. What kind of photography? The kind that pays bills sometimes. I immediately regretted the bitter edge in my voice. Lunch break arrived like a reprieve. While everyone else headed to the cafeteria, I slipped away to the quiet poetry section, pulling out a granola bar I'd brought from home. Money was too tight for lunch out. Mind if I join you? Serena appeared with a sandwich from some fancy deli, the kind wrapped in real paper instead of plastic. I shrugged, scooting over on the floor between the shelves. Can I see some of your work? She settled beside me, close enough that I caught her perfume, something expensive and subtle. I hesitated, then pulled out my battered tablet. The screen had a crack across one corner, but my photos still looked good. Street scenes, portraits of working people, the beauty I found in everyday love that most people overlooked. She studied each image intently, and I watched her face change. The polished socialite mask slipped away, replaced by something genuine. These are incredible. Her finger hovered over a photo of an elderly man feeding pigeons outside the courthouse. You see things differently. I see things honestly. That's rare. She looked up at me, and for a moment the space between money and need disappeared entirely. Coffee tomorrow? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I'd like that. She smiled and something warm unfurled in my chest. As we headed back to the book chaos, I wondered what I'd just gotten myself into. Rich women were complicated territory, and I'd sworn off complications after my last disaster. But something about the way Serena had looked at my photographs like she really saw them made me want to risk it. Maybe some complications were worth it. The afternoon flew by in a blur of sorted books and stolen conversations. When the volunteer coordinator announced closing time, I realized I'd been looking forward to seeing Serena again tomorrow. More than I'd looked forward to anything in months. Same time tomorrow? She asked as we gathered our things. Same time tomorrow. I walked to my beat-up Honda while she climbed into a sleek BMW. But somehow the distance between our parking spots felt smaller than it should have. The next day's volunteer work passed in a haze of nervous energy. Every time footsteps approached the back room, my heart jumped, expecting to see that familiar blonde figure. But Serena didn't show up until our agreed coffee time. Ready for that coffee? Her voice made me look up from a box of mystery novels. I nodded, suddenly aware of my appearance. Same flannel, same jeans, same everything that screamed broke photographer. The cafe she chose made my stomach clench. Artisan this, organic that. Prices that made my monthly grocery budget look like pocket change. I stood frozen in front of the menu board, calculating and recalculating. 2 cappuccinos, Serena told the barista, then turned to me. Unless you prefer something else. That's fine. Relief flooded through me. At least I wouldn't have to choose between rent and caffeine. We found a corner table near the window. I set my cracked tablet between us while she produced the latest iPhone, its screen pristine and gleaming. Show me more of your work, she said, sliding the tablet toward herself. I swiped through folders, watching her face as she absorbed each image. Her reaction seemed genuine. Not the polite interest rich people usually showed my art. When she paused at a photo of a single mother working 3 jobs, something shifted in her expression. This woman, you know her story, Carla. She cleans offices at night, works retail during the day, watches her neighbors' kids for extra cash. I traced the edge of my tablet. She's beautiful, isn't she? Even exhausted. You see beauty where others see struggle. Beauty exists everywhere. Money just makes it easier to photograph. Serena's fingers moved across her phone screen, showing me her travel blog. Images from Paris, Tokyo, Bali. Professional quality, but somehow sterile. Perfect sunsets and flawless hotel rooms. These are technically excellent, I said carefully. But she caught the hesitation. But they could be anyone's photos. They're beautiful, but they don't feel lived in. She stared at her phone screen, then set it aside. I've never thought about it that way. I reached for my camera bag, and the worn strap chose that moment to snap completely. My Nikon tumbled toward the floor, and we both lunged for it, our hands colliding as we caught the camera together. Her fingers were soft against mine, manicured nails contrasting with my paint-stained knuckles. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The cafe sounds faded into background noise. Let me help fix this, she whispered, still holding the camera with me. You don't have to. I want to. We spent the next hour in a camera shop downtown, Serena insisting on buying a quality strap to replace my broken one. The shop owner treated her like royalty and me like I was stealing oxygen. But she didn't seem to notice the disparity. This is too much, I protested as she handed her credit card to the cashier. It's a strap, Maya, not a car. But to me, it was the difference between grocery money and no grocery money. She lived in a world where $40 meant nothing. I lived where $40 meant everything. Walking back to our cars, the winter air is sharp against our faces. She stopped suddenly. I'm sorry for what? The money thing. I can see it makes you uncomfortable. I studied her face in the streetlight glow. It's not your fault you're rich. It's not your fault you're not. Something honest passed between us in that moment. An acknowledgement of the gap we'd have to cross if this thing between us had any chance. Want to see something? I pulled out my camera, new strap secure around my wrist. I showed her how to hold it properly, standing behind her to adjust her grip. Her hair smelled like expensive shampoo, and something uniquely her. When she turned her head slightly, her cheek almost brushed mine. What am I looking for? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Whatever calls to you. She raised the camera, scanning the street through the viewfinder. After a moment, she pressed the shutter. The click seemed loud in the quiet evening. What did you see? I asked. That couple. She pointed to an elderly pair sharing a bench, the man reading aloud while the woman listened with closed eyes. They looked like they'd been doing that for 50 years. I looked at the camera's display screen. She'd captured something beautiful without realizing it. The composition was amateur, but the heart was there. "You do see things," I murmured. When she handed the camera back, our fingers touched again. This time, neither of us pretended it was an accident. The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving. "Maya." Her voice was different now. Softer. "Yeah." Instead of answering, she leaned closer. Her lips were warm against mine. Soft and tentative at first, then more certain when I didn't pull away. The kiss tasted like cappuccino and possibility. When we broke apart, I felt dizzy. "I should go," I said, not meaning it. "Should you?" I looked into those blue eyes and saw the same confusion I felt. Rich girl, broke girl. It was a story that usually ended badly. But her lips had been soft against mine, and her hands had been gentle with my broken camera strap. "Maybe I should stay a little longer." Her smile lit up the entire street. "Maybe you should." The call came 3 days later while I was editing photos in my cramped apartment kitchen. The only room with decent light. "There's something I want to show you." Serena's voice carried excitement I hadn't heard before. "Can you meet me downtown?" Northlight Gallery. I knew the gallery. Overpriced art for people who bought paintings to match their furniture. "What's going on? Just trust me." An hour later, I stood outside the sleek building, feeling underdressed in my usual flannel and jeans. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see people in cocktail attire holding wine glasses. The kind of crowd that made my skin crawl. Serena appeared at my elbow, stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Ready for what exactly?" She smiled mysteriously and guided me inside. The gallery space was all white walls and dramatic lighting, filled with the kind of people who said things like bold, artistic vision, while sipping overpriced Cabernet. Then I saw them. My photographs were mounted, framed, and lit just right. The elderly man feeding pigeons. Carla juggling her 3 jobs. A homeless veteran outside the courthouse. My lick the one tourists never saw hung like it mattered. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice coming out strangled. "I may have shown your portfolio to the gallery owner." Serena's cheeks flushed pink. She loved them. "Without asking me," I said. "I wanted to surprise you." I stood there, staring at my work on pristine walls, ringed by people who probably made more in a month than I had all year. A woman in pearls studied my photo of the food bank line, tilting her head as if it were a code to crack. "They don't understand what they're looking at," I muttered. "Some do." Serena nodded toward a young man absorbed in my portrait of the single mother, standing utterly still. "Art speaks to people. Maya, your art speaks." The gallery owner, a sharp woman in her 50s, approached with an older gentleman at her side. "Miss Hart, I'd like you to meet Arthur Penfield. He's interested in purchasing 3 of your pieces." I nearly choked on the complimentary wine I'd been nursing. "Purchasing? The composition and raw emotion are quite remarkable," Arthur said. "Reminds me of Walker Evans's Depression-era work." "How much for the series?" I opened my mouth, shut it, then glanced helplessly at Serena. "We'll need to discuss pricing," she said smoothly. "Maya's work is gaining recognition rapidly." As Arthur drifted away, I pulled Serena aside. "I don't know how to do this." "You don't have to do anything except make beautiful art. Let me handle the business side. I can't let you manage my career." "I'm not managing anything. I'm helping a talented artist get the recognition she deserves." The evening blurred into compliments and business cards. People asked about technique, about what inspired me, about my next show. I heard myself talking about photography with real enthusiasm, watching faces brighten as I described finding beauty in the places no one expects it. By closing time, I'd sold 4 photographs and had 3 commissions on the table. "I can't believe this happened," I said as we stepped into the cool night and headed toward our cars. "I can," Serena replied. Your work deserves to be seen. We stopped beside my Honda. That familiar awkward goodbye hovered, but this time, it felt charged. The rush of the night, the wine, the way she looked at me when I spoke about my art, it all braided into something electric. Thank you, I said, for believing in me. Thank you for trusting me. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of silver in her blue eyes. The parking lot was empty except for us. Street lights creating pools of yellow light on the asphalt. Maya? Her voice was breathless. Yeah. This time I kissed her first, pressed her back against my car door, and kissed her like I'd been thinking about it for days, which I had. She tasted like wine and possibility, and when her hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, I forgot about everything except the warmth of her mouth and the little sounds she made. When I deepened the kiss, we broke apart, both breathing hard. Your place or mine. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Her smile was answer enough. My apartment looked like what it was. A struggling artist's space held together with hope and duct tape. But Serena didn't seem to notice the second-hand furniture or the bills stacked on my coffee table. She moved through my small living room like she belonged there, touching my photographs pinned to the walls, examining the books stacked everywhere. I love this, she said, pausing at a photo of sunrise over the cotton fields outside town. You see magic in ordinary things. Maybe ordinary things are already magic. She turned to face me, and the space between us felt charged with possibility. Maybe you're right. I reached for her, and this time there was no hesitation. We tried to be gentle, careful, but 3 days of building tension erupted into something urgent and consuming. Her dress pulled on my bedroom floor next to my flannel shirt, and when she pulled me down onto my second-hand mattress, nothing else mattered except the slide of skin against skin and the way she said my name, like a prayer. Later, we lay tangled in my mismatched sheets, her head on my shoulder, fingers tracing lazy patterns on my chest. I've never done this before, she whispered. Done what? Fallen for someone so different from me. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Different how? You know how I did know. Rich girl, broke girl. It was a story old as time, usually ending in heartbreak. But lying there in my small bedroom, her breathing evening out as she drifted toward sleep, it felt like maybe we could write a different ending. Maybe some stories were worth the risk. 3 weeks into whatever this was between us, the bubble burst. I was editing photos at the gallery, preparing for a small exhibition when Victor Langley walked in. Expensive suit, cold eyes, and an aura that screamed money and power. I'd seen him at the opening hovering near Serena like a well-dressed shark. Miss Hart. He didn't bother with pleasantries. We need to talk about what? About your relationship with Serena. I sat down, my camera already feeling defensive. I don't see how that's your business. Everything involving Serena is my business. I manage her affairs, her investments, her reputation. He studied me like I was a balance sheet with bad numbers. She's worth $37 million. You're worth what exactly? The number hit me like a physical blow. 37 million. I made 23,000 last year on a good year. Her family built their fortune over 3 generations, Victor continued. They have expectations about who she associates with romantically. Associates with anger flared in my chest. Is that what I am? You're a phase. A walk on the wild side before she settles down with someone appropriate. The door chimed and Serena herself walked in, designer bag over her shoulder, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. She took one look at Victor and me facing off, and her expression shifted. What's going on here? Just having a conversation about reality, Victor said smoothly. About appropriate relationships and social expectations. Screw your social expectations, I snapped. 3 weeks of pent-up insecurity erupting. And screw you for thinking you can come in here and manage Serena's life like she's your property. Maya, Serena's voice carried warning. No, let's talk about reality. I turned to face her. $37 million. Serena, when were you planning to mention that? Her cheeks flushed red. It's not important. Not important. We go to dinner. You pay. Coffee. You pay that gallery opening. You paid for everything, didn't you? The framing, the wine, probably even the damn wall space. That's not how it happened, isn't it? Poor little photographer needs charity from the rich girl. The words tasted bitter. Is this some kind of pretty woman fantasy for you? That's enough. Her voice cracked like a whip. Victor, get out. Serena, be reasonable. Out now. Victor straightened his tie, shot me a look that promised this wasn't over, and left. The silence that followed felt toxic. I didn't tell you about the money because it doesn't matter, Serena said quietly. It's the only thing that matters. Look around, Serena. Look at this place. Look at my car. Look at my life. We're not playing house here. This is real for me. It's real for me, too. Is it? When things get complicated, when your family cuts you off or your friends disapprove, what happens to us? She moved closer, reaching for my hands, but I stepped back. Don't. I can't think when you touch me. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're overthinking. Or maybe you're undering. I grabbed my camera bag. I need some air. I walked for hours through downtown Brackenridge, replaying every interaction we'd had through this new lens. The expensive restaurants, the casual shopping, the way she never checked prices. How had I been so blind? When I finally returned to my apartment after dark, I found her sitting on my front steps, still in that designer outfit, but somehow looking smaller. I've been waiting for 3 hours, she said. You should go home to your mansion or penthouse, or whatever 37 million buys these days. It's just a house, Maya, with too many rooms and not enough people. Something in her voice made me pause. Loneliness. Real bone-deep loneliness. That sounded familiar. Why didn't you tell me? I sat beside her on the concrete steps. Because of this. Because of how you're looking at me right now like I'm a different person, aren't you? I'm the same woman who kissed you in that parking lot. The same woman who spent last night in your bed telling you things I've never told anyone. She was right. The woman beside me looked the same, sounded the same, but the context had shifted everything. Your family really has expectations. My family has opinions about everything, including who I sleep with. She turned to face me, especially who I sleep with. And what do they think about me? They don't know about you yet. Yet? I was hoping we'd get there together. I studied her face in the porch light. Despite everything, despite the money, and Victor, and the impossibility of it all, I wanted to believe her. Come inside, I said quietly. My apartment looked even shabbier with her in it. Designer perfection against my thrift store reality. But when she kicked off her expensive heels and curled up on my second-hand couch, like she belonged there, some of the tension in my chest loosened. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what? Of not being enough. Of you waking up one day and realizing you could have anyone. So why choose the broke photographer with trust issues? She stood up, moved to where I sat on the edge of my bed and cupped my face in her hands. Because the broke photographer sees me. Really sees me, not just the portfolio and the trust fund. Her thumb brushed across my cheekbone. Because when you kiss me, I feel like I matter for who I am, not what I own. When she leaned down to kiss me, I tasted honesty and desperation and something deeper. This wasn't charity or slumming or whatever Victor thought it was. This was two lonely people finding something real in each other. I pulled her down onto the bed, and this time when we made love, it felt like claiming each other, like promising to figure out how to bridge the impossible gap between her world and mine. Afterwards, she traced patterns on my bare shoulder with her fingertip. We'll figure this out, she whispered against my skin. Will we? We have to. I'm not losing you to my bank account. I wanted to believe her. Lying there in the dark, listening to her breathe, I almost did. 2 months after the Victor confrontation, we found our rhythm. Not perfect, Not easy, but ours. Look at this. Serena spread the mock-up across my kitchen table, eyes bright with excitement. The travel photography book we'd been planning had taken shape. Page by page, over countless late-night sessions, I studied the layout, her travel connections, my artistic eye, her words, my images. Destinations through different lenses stretched between us like a bridge we'd built together. The publisher meeting is next week, she said, fingers drumming nervously on the table. Martin thinks we have a real shot. Martin was the editor who'd been courting us for months. The kind of meeting that could change everything. The kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about since picking up my first camera. Nervous? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We'd both been walking on air and anxiety in equal measure. Terrified? She laughed, but it sounded forced. What if they hate it? They won't hate it. I moved behind her chair, hands settling on her shoulders. Your writing brings the places to life. My photos capture the heart underneath. She leaned back against me, and I pressed a kiss to the top of her head. These quiet moments had become my favorite part of us when the money and class differences faded into background noise. We'd been traveling together for the book short trips within Texas at first, then branching out to Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. Serena handled the logistics while I focused on finding the shots that would make readers want to pack their bags immediately. In a tiny motel outside Mesa Vista, she'd watched me photograph a sunset through a cracked window, then pulled me onto the lumpy mattress and made love to me, while the desert light painted everything gold. Later, tangled in cheap sheets that smelled like industrial detergent, she'd whispered travel dreams that had nothing to do with five-star resorts, and everything to do with authentic moments. Remember that place in Ta? She murmured now, head still resting against my chest. The little cafe with the terrible coffee and the owner, who told us about her grandfather's pottery studio. Serena turned in my arms. You made her look beautiful in that photo, like she was holding all the history of that place in her hands. She was. That's what I mean. You see things I would have missed completely. The book project had taught us both something. Serena's privileged perspective filtered through my lens of finding beauty, and struggle created something neither of us could have managed alone. Her connections opened doors. My vision decided what we brought back, but success brought its own pressures. Phone calls from her family lawyer about business ventures requiring oversight. Victor showing up at restaurants making pointed comments about appropriate partnerships. The weight of knowing that failure would prove everyone right about us. What if this doesn't work? I asked one evening after a particularly tense call with the publisher's marketing team. It'll work. Serena sat down her laptop where she'd been fine-tuning chapter descriptions. It has to work. And if it doesn't, then we'll figure out something else. She moved to where I sat on the couch, curling up against my side. We're good together, Maya. Not just the book. Us. I wanted to believe her, but doubt had been creeping in around the edges. The money conversations were getting more frequent, more pointed. How could we split profits fairly when she'd covered most of our travel expenses? What happened when my $23,000 reality collided with her investment portfolio? I love you, I said instead of voicing my fears. I love you, too. Her lips found mine soft and familiar. Whatever happens with the book, we still have this. The week leading up to the publisher meeting passed in a blur of final preparations. We rehearsed our presentation until we could deliver it in our sleep, printed backup copies of everything, even practiced potential questions. The night before our flight to New York, we lay in my bed going over talking points one more time. You handle the artistic vision questions, Serena said, her head on my shoulder. I'll take the market positioning and distribution stuff. What if they want to change everything? Then we negotiate. That's what business is, right? Finding middle ground. But some gaps were too wide for middle ground. That thought kept me awake long after Serena's breathing had evened out beside me. The publisher's office was everything I'd expected. Glass and steel reaching toward the sky. Conference rooms that cost more to furnish than I'd made in 5 years. Martin Ellison looked like Central Casting's idea of a literary editor. All silver hair and expensive glasses. "I've been looking forward to this meeting," he said as we settled around a table that could have seated 12. "The concept is fascinating. Luxury travel through an artist's eye." We launched into our presentation, pages flowing between us like a conversation we'd had 100 times. Serena talked about hidden gems and authentic experiences, while I explained how my photographs captured the soul of a place rather than just its surface. Martin nodded along, occasionally jotting notes. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Impressive work. The writing is evocative. The photography is stunning." He paused and I felt my heart sink toward my shoes. "We'd like to make an offer." The number he mentioned made my head spin. Enough money to flip my life completely, to never worry about rent or groceries again. Enough to make me Serena's equal, at least on paper. Walking back to our hotel through the Manhattan crowds, I felt like I was floating. "We did it," I kept saying. "We actually did it. We did it," Serena echoed. But there was something off in her voice. That night, in our absurdly expensive hotel room, we celebrated the only way that felt right. Serena's hands on my body felt like promises, like claiming something we'd built together. When she moved above me, in the city light pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt a kind of power money couldn't buy. Afterward, she lay silent too long. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing. Everything's perfect." Perfect made me nervous. Perfect was brittle things that shattered if you looked too closely. "The book is going to change things," I said. "Good changes. Are you sure about that?" She turned toward me, and in the dim spill of the city below, there was something uncertain in her expression. "I'm sure about us," she said finally. It wasn't quite an answer, but I let it pass. We had a book deal. We had each other. For tonight, that felt like enough. The call came at 2:47 a.m., 3 days before our final presentation with the publisher. "I can't do this." Serena's voice was barely a whisper through the phone. I shot upright. "Can't do what?" "Any of it. The book, the meetings, us. I want to call it off." "Are you drunk?" "Stone cold sober." "That's the problem." I threw on clothes and drove to her house for the first time since we'd been together. The address took me through gates that probably cost more than my car, past manicured grounds straight out of a magazine, to a mansion big enough for 20 families. She opened the door in silk pajamas that cost more than my monthly rent, eyes rimmed red and hollow. "You came." "Of course I came. Now talk to me." Her living room looked like a spread from a design catalog, floor-to-ceiling glass. Furniture that seemed afraid to be used. Art that belonged in museums. I perched on the edge of a couch that probably had its own insurance policy. "I've been lying to you," she said, standing by the windows that overlooked Brackenridge's wealthy district. "About what?" "About everything. About who I am, what I want, why I'm doing any of this." My stomach tightened. "Start from the beginning." She turned to face me, and in the moonlight flooding those massive panes, she looked like a stranger. "I've never earned anything in my life, Maya. Not one damn thing. The money, the connections, the opportunities, even the confidence to walk into that gallery and demand they show your work. All of it handed to me because of who my parents were. That doesn't make you a fraud, doesn't it? I've been playing dress up, pretending to be this independent woman building something meaningful with you. But the truth is, I'm terrified of being genuine about anything." I stayed quiet, sensing she needed to get this out. "When I met you, you were so real, so authentically yourself, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." Her voice cracked. "I wanted to be like that. I wanted to deserve someone like that." "You do deserve it, do I? Or am I just another rich girl slumming it with someone interesting until the novelty wears off?" The question hung between us like a blade. It was the fear I'd carried since the beginning. The one I'd tried to bury under good sex and shared dreams. Is that what this is to you? I asked quietly. I don't know anymore. Tears started streaming down her face. I look at our book, our beautiful collaborative work, and I panic. What if I'm not good enough? What if my writing is just amateur hour propped up by your incredible photographs? Your writing is beautiful, is it? Or does it just sound pretty because I've had expensive educations and editing help you'll never have access to? I stood up, moved to where she stood by the windows. Outside, the manicured lawns stretched endlessly, a green ocean of privilege I'd never inhabit. You want to know what I think? I cuped her face in my hands, forcing her to look at me. I think you're scared because this is the first real thing you've ever built. And real things can fail. Exactly. They can fail. And then what? I go back to being daddy's little rich girl while you lose everything. Or they can succeed and we figure out how to handle that together. What if I'm not brave enough for either outcome? I studied her face, seeing the vulnerability she usually kept hidden behind designer clothes and confident smiles. This was the Serena I'd fallen for. The one who existed underneath all the money and expectations. You are brave enough. You were brave enough to see something in my photographs that no one else did. Brave enough to stand up to Victor. Brave enough to sleep with a broke photographer when everyone in your world told you it was a mistake. What if they're right? What if they're wrong? She leaned into my touch and for a moment, the scared little rich girl disappeared, replaced by the woman I loved. I keep thinking about my parents, she whispered. They had an arranged engagement basically, to appropriate families, to appropriate fortunes, to people who learned to love each other because it was expedient. We're not your parents, aren't we? You think I don't see how you calculate prices when we go out? How you get that look when I pay for things? Maybe this whole thing is just another kind of arrangement. Your talent and my money. The words stung because they hit close to fears I'd never fully acknowledged. Is that really what you think? I think I'm in love with you, and I don't know if that's enough to bridge the gap between who we are. So, you want to quit? 3 days before we could have everything we've worked for. I want to stop pretending this is sustainable long term. I pulled my hands away, anger starting to build. You want to know what's not sustainable? The self-pity spiral. This assumption that I'm too fragile to handle your reality or too stupid to make my own choices. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Poor little Maya can't possibly understand the burden of wealth. Poor little Maya probably just using you for money anyway. I never said that. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you feel guilty about paying for dinner. She moved to the couch, sinking into those expensive cushions like they could swallow her whole. I don't know how to be in love with someone so different from me. You learn. We both learn. I sat beside her, the fight draining out of me. That's what love is, isn't it? Figuring it out as you go. What if we can't figure it out? What if we can? She turned to look at me, and in her eyes I saw the woman who'd kissed me outside that gallery. Who'd made love to me in cheap motel and expensive hotel rooms with equal passion. I'm scared, Maya. I'm scared, too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. She leaned against me, her head finding its familiar place on my shoulder. The meeting is in 3 days. I know. If we do this, if we really commit to seeing where this goes, I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll tell me if this stops working for you. If the money thing becomes too much. If I become too much. Promise me you won't just endure it because you love me. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Promise me the same thing. Promise me you won't sabotage us because you're afraid of being happy. Deal. We sat in comfortable silence. Two women from different worlds trying to build a bridge strong enough to hold both our dreams and our fears. The book is good, isn't it? She asked quietly. The book is beautiful. We're good together, Serena, in work and in life. Even when I'm being neurotic, especially when you're being neurotic. It means you care. She lifted her head to look at me. I do care about the book, about us, about making this work. When she kissed me, it tasted like promises and apologies and hope. Like maybe love really could be enough to bridge any gap. The attack came from two directions at once, like a perfectly coordinated military strike. First, Victor showed up at my apartment with papers, legal documents, restraining orders, cease and desist letters, the works. Miss Whitmore's family has asked me to make their position clear, he said, standing in my doorway like an expensive undertaker. Any further contact with Serena will be considered harassment. You can't be serious. Deadly serious. They've also filed injunctions to prevent publication of your book, claiming it violates several confidentiality agreements Serena signed regarding family business interests. My hands shook as I took the papers. Legal language that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. But the threat was clear. Stay away or face financial ruin. She knows about this. She's been cut off. Bank accounts frozen. Credit cards canceled. Trust funds suspended. His smile was razor thin. Amazing how quickly reality sets in when the money stops flowing. The second attack hit downtown at the community center where I'd been volunteering. We've had complaints, the director said, not meeting my eyes about inappropriate behavior during volunteer activities. What kind of complaints? Sexual misconduct. Making other volunteers uncomfortable with your lifestyle choices. The words hit like physical blows. Lifestyle choices. In a town like Brackenridge, that phrase carried enough poison to kill careers. That's and you know it. I'm sorry, Maya. Your volunteer privileges are suspended pending investigation. Walking home through downtown, I noticed the stares, whispers behind hands, conversations that stopped when I passed. Someone had been talking, spreading stories designed to make my life here impossible. My phone buzzed with a text from my biggest commercial photography client. Services no longer required. Check in the mail. Another buzz. The gallery owner, who'd shown my work, reconsidering our arrangement, will be in touch. By evening, I'd lost 3 clients and 2 exhibition opportunities. The message was clear. This is what happens when you forget your place. I was sitting in my apartment staring at the legal papers and wondering how deep a whole $37 million could dig when Serena knocked on my door. She looked terrible, hair unwashed, designer clothes wrinkled, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. But she was there. I brought wine, she said, holding up a bottle that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Seemed appropriate for the apocalypse. Your family really cut you off completely. Turns out everything I thought was mine actually belonged to various trusts and foundations. She collapsed onto my couch. I'm officially broke. How broke? I have $87 in my checking account and a credit card that gets declined at coffee shops. Broke. I stared at her. How is that even legal? Family money comes with family strings. Lots of them. All controlled by boards my parents happen to sit on. She opened the wine with hands that trembled slightly. I also got a visit from the family lawyer. Apparently, if I continue this relationship, they'll make sure I never work anywhere in publishing, travel, or media again. Can they do that? Money talks, Maya. Especially old money with old connections. She poured wine into coffee mugs since I didn't own proper glasses. But here's the interesting part. They offered me a deal. What kind of deal? End things with you. Publicly apologize for this phase and agreed to supervise dating within approved social circles. In exchange, full restoration of privileges plus a $5 million bonus. The number hung between us like a loaded gun. $5 million, I said quietly. $5 million? That's life-changing money. It is. I studied her face, looking for signs of temptation. Are you considering it? I already gave them my answer, which was she leaned across the coffee table and kissed me. Wine sweet and fierce. I told them to go to hell. Relief flooded through me so powerfully it made me dizzy. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She settled back onto the couch. Though, I should mention I'm now unemployed and basically homeless. You can stay here in your one-bedroom apartment with your thrift store furniture and your broken air conditioner. It's not much, but it's honest. It's perfect. Her smile was the first genuine one I'd seen from her in weeks. Besides, I've always wondered what normal life felt like. The next few days taught her quickly. Normal life meant instant coffee instead of artisan blends. Normal life meant shopping at discount grocery stores and checking prices. Normal life meant sharing one small bathroom and sleeping on a mattress that had seen better decades. But normal life also meant waking up together every morning, making breakfast from whatever we could find in my sparse pantry, talking about dreams instead of investment portfolios. I applied for 3 jobs today, she told me over dinner, which consisted of pasta and whatever sauce was on sale, waitressing, retail, and office temp work. Any luck? The retail place said they'd call back. The restaurant manager seemed interested until he Googled my name and hit the articles about the family money. She twirled spaghetti around her fork like she'd been eating cheap dinners her whole life. Turns out being surrounded by millionaires doesn't make you more employable. We'll figure it out, I said. Will we? She exhaled. The publisher called today. They're pulling the book deal. Apparently there are questions about the legal rights to the material. The final blow. Everything we'd built, gone because her family had better lawyers than we had money for lawyers. I reached across our tiny table and took her hand. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be proud. Her fingers tightened around mine. We made something beautiful together. That doesn't vanish just because they won't publish it. But the money, the chance, there will be other opportunities, other publishers, other doors. She lifted my knuckles to her lips. But there won't be another you, Maya. And I'm not giving that up for all the money in the world. That night, we made love with a desperate intensity, as if proving to the universe that what we had was real, worth fighting for. When she moved beneath me, golden hair spilling across my cheap pillows, I felt richer than her family had ever made her feel. After, she traced slow circles on my chest with one fingertip. I love you in this bed, she whispered. In this apartment, in this life we're building. Even without the money, even without the book deal, especially without the money. For the first time in my adult life, I know someone wants me for exactly who I am. You're sure about this? About us? I've never been more sure of anything. She kissed my collarbone, then sighed. Though I should probably learn to cook something besides pasta. We'll figure it out together. Together, she echoed, and something in the way she said it made me believe we really would. Outside my small windows, Brackenridge stretched endlessly under the Texas star's rich blocks and poor ones. Privilege and struggle side by side under the same sky. But here, in my little apartment with my broke girlfriend and our impossible dreams, none of that mattered. Here, we were just two women in love, learning as we went. The breakthrough came from the least expected place. 2 months into our new life of shared struggle, the phone rang at 6 a.m. I answered, groggy, braced for another client rejection. Is this Maya Hart, the photographer? Depending on who's asking. My name is Lena Park. I work for Independent Arts Quarterly. We received an anonymous submission of your book proposal, and I think we should talk. I sat up, suddenly wide awake. Our publisher dropped the project. Corporate publishers aren't the only game in town. We specialize in work the mainstream houses are too scared to touch. 3 hours later, I sat across from Lena in a cafe that served actual good coffee at reasonable prices. She was younger than expected with fierce eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Your book is remarkable, she said, sliding a manila folder across the table. The combination of raw photography and intimate travel writing creates something completely fresh. The legal issues were fabricated. I had our lawyers review everything. No legitimate claim to stop publication. Her smile was sharp. Old money families love throwing around legal threats, but they rarely follow through when challenged by people who understand the law. The advance she offered was smaller than the corporate deal, but it came with something more valuable: complete creative control. We want to do a limited first edition followed by wider distribution if sales support it. Lena explained, this isn't get-rich-quick money, but it's sustainable income for artists willing to build audiences organically. I called Serena from the parking lot. We have a publisher, I said when she answered. Silence. Then quietly, are you serious? Dead serious? Independent Arts Quarterly wants our book. The scream that came through the phone made me pull it away from my ear. By the time I got home, she'd already started dinner. Actual dinner, not pasta from a box. She'd been taking cooking classes at the community center, determined to contribute something besides her trust fund to our relationship. How did they find us? She asked, stirring something that smelled incredible. Anonymous submission. Someone sent them our proposal. Who would do that? We looked at each other, the same thought occurring simultaneously. Arthur, we said in unison. Arthur Penfield, the collector who'd bought my first gallery pieces, who'd stayed in touch, occasionally checking on my work even after the social blacklisting began. The confirmation came in an email that evening. Some artist is too important to let money silence. Congratulations on finding the right publisher. HM. 6 weeks later, we sat in the Independent Arts Quarterly offices for our final presentation meeting. This time, the conference room was small, cluttered, and filled with people who looked like they genuinely cared about books rather than profit margins. We love the authentic voice, the editor said as we wrapped up. Travel writing usually focuses on luxury experiences or budget backpacking. This captures something in between. Real people discovering real places. Walking back to our car, Serena grabbed my hand. We did it again. We did it together. The book launch party happened at that same gallery where everything started. Lena had invited local artists, writers, and anyone interested in supporting independent publishing. No fancy cocktails or designer dresses this time. Just folding tables covered with checkered tablecloths and wine served in plastic cups. I watched Serena work the room, talking to people about the book with genuine enthusiasm. She'd found a job managing social media for a local nonprofit work. That challenged her in ways trust fund management never had. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked completely comfortable in her own skin. She's different now, Arthur said, appearing at my elbow. More grounded. We both are good. Artists need grounding. Keeps the work honest. The evening's highlight came when Lena announced pre-order numbers. Not bestseller territory, but solid enough to guarantee the wider release and already generating interest from other independent publishers for future projects. Later that night, back in our apartment that somehow felt less cramped now that we'd chosen it together, we celebrated the only way that felt right. Serena's hands on my skin felt like home, like promises we'd fought to keep. When she whispered my name against my throat, I heard a future in it. I have something to tell you, she said afterward, tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder. Good something or bad something? Complicated something? She propped herself up on her elbow. My family called through Victor. They want to negotiate a reconciliation. My stomach clenched. What kind of reconciliation? Partial restoration of privileges? Enough money to invest in our book success? Maybe start our own publishing imprint? Her voice was carefully neutral. They've realized I'm not going through a phase. What did you tell them? I told them I need to discuss it with my partner. Partner, not girlfriend, not lover, partner. Someone whose opinion mattered as much as her own in major life decisions. What do you want to do? I asked. I want whatever gives us the best chance at building something lasting together. Not just the relationship, but the work. The books we could publish, the artists we could support. I studied her face in the dim bedroom light. You missed the money. I missed the power to make things happen. There is a difference. There was. I'd learned that watching her navigate the world without her financial safety net, money had been her tool for creating opportunities, not just for comfort. If we take their offer, There will be conditions probably. Supervised reconciliation, family approval of major decisions, public appearances showing I've settled down appropriately. Can you live with those conditions? Can we live with those conditions? This affects both of us. The question hung between us. Independence versus opportunity. Struggling artists versus artists with resources to make real change. I love this, I said, gesturing at our small apartment. I love what we've built here, just us. So do I, but I also love what we could build with resources behind us. She was right. The book was just the beginning. With proper backing, we could create a platform for other artists like us. Other stories the mainstream world ignored. We do this together, I said finally. Full partnership, joint decisions, no compromises on who we are. Together, she agreed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like promises and possibility. Outside our windows, Brackenridge slept under its blanket of stars. Rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods, all part of the same sprawling tapestry we learned to navigate together. Tomorrow would bring negotiations, difficult conversations, and choices that would shape our future. But tonight, we were just two women who'd found something worth fighting for, and we'd won. The book launch exceeded everyone's expectations. 6 months after publication, Destinations Through Different Lenses had sold 12,000 copies and spawned speaking engagements across 3 states. Independent Arts Quarterly was planning a second printing, and other publishers had approached us about future projects. The success party was held at the same community library where we'd met, now transformed with Lina's eye for understated elegance. String lights hung between the bookshelves, creating intimate reading nooks where guests could flip through our book while sipping local wine. I watched Serena hold court near the biography section, discussing sustainable tourism with a group of travel bloggers. She'd negotiated a careful détente with her family, accepting limited financial support in exchange for quarterly dinners and strategic appearances at charity functions. The compromise allowed her to invest in our growing publishing venture, while maintaining the independence we'd fought so hard to establish. Quite a journey from that first volunteer day, Arthur said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. You knew, didn't you? That first night at the gallery, you knew what we could become. I knew you saw something special in each other. The rest was up to you. The evening surprise came when Lena took the microphone for announcements. Before we wrap up, I have some news about our featured authors, she said, grinning at us across the room. Maya and Serena's next book has been optioned for a documentary series. The room erupted in applause. I felt Serena's hand slip into mine, squeezing tight. Netflix? Someone called out. Close. Lena laughed. PBS. They want to follow your process for the next book. Show how collaborative art really works. Later, after the last guest had left and we'd helped stack folding chairs, Serena and I walked through the now quiet library stacks. The poetry section where we'd shared our first real conversation looked exactly the same. But everything else had changed. Remember when you thought I was just another rich girl slumming it? She asked, running her fingers along book spines. Remember when you thought I was just another starving artist who'd disappear when things got complicated? We stopped at the exact spot where we'd sorted books that first day, where she'd noticed my broken camera strap, and everything started. I have something for you, she said, pulling a small velvet box from her jacket pocket. My breath caught. Serena, it's not what you think. Well, not entirely. She opened the box to reveal matching silver rings, simple bands with small engravings. I know we can't legally marry in Texas, but I thought maybe a commitment ceremony here where it all began. I took one of the rings, reading the inscription through different lenses. Same vision. Cheesy. Perfect. I slipped the ring onto her finger, then let her slide mine into place. Yes, by the way, in case there was any doubt. Good, because I already reserved the community room for next month. Already planned the whole thing. I learned from the best about making things happen. She kissed me softly, tasting like wine and promises. Besides, someone needs to marry us before that documentary crew shows up. I refused to be the girlfriend in our own love story. The ceremony was small, intimate, exactly what we'd wanted. Lena officiated. Arthur walked us both down the makeshift aisle between book stacks, and a dozen close friends witnessed our vows in the same room, where we'd first connected over poetry and broken camera equipment. I promise to see the world through your lens, Serena said, voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. And to help you see yourself through mine. I promise to build something beautiful with you, I replied. Something that honors both where we came from and where we're going. The rings felt right on our fingers, symbols of a choice we made daily to bridge the gap between different worlds. 6 months later, the PBS crew followed us to Iceland for our second book project. Watching the dailies each evening, I marveled at what they'd captured. To women who learned to navigate differences in background, temperament, and vision to create something neither could have achieved alone. You make us look like we know what we're doing, Serena said one night as we reviewed footage in our Reykjavik hotel room. Don't we? Most of the time, I feel like we're making it up as we go along. That's what makes it real. I curled up beside her in the narrow hotel bed, her wedding ring clicking against mine as our hands intertwined. Real love isn't a fairy tale. It's two people choosing each other every day, even when it's complicated. Especially when it's complicated. Through the window, the northern lights painted the sky in possible greens and blues. Tomorrow, we'd photograph the aurora through the lens of local folklore. Serena's research combined with my eye for capturing magic in the mundane. But tonight, we were just two women who'd found their way to each other against all odds. Rich girl and broke artist, now partners in every sense that mattered. Building a life that honored both our histories and our dreams. 8 months later, the documentary premiered to critical acclaim. Reviews praised our genuine partnership and how we'd turned our differences into creative strength. More importantly, it opened doors to other unconventional collaborations, other artists willing to risk everything for love and art. In our new apartment bigger than my old one, still modest by Serena's former standards, I watched her map out our third book project, while fielding calls from artists hoping our publishing house would consider their work. She caught me looking and smiled. What? Just thinking about how far we've come. Regrets? Not one. I slipped my arms around her from behind and kissed her temple. Though I should probably learn to cook something besides pasta. We'll figure it out together. Together. It had become our favorite word, our steady promise. Different lenses, same vision, building something beautiful, one day at a time. And we were only getting started.